Okie doke, here we are. Hi, it's it's me. Been a while. I know. Um, I don't know. I saw on Twitter the discourse about what makes a deck bad, and I thought I kind of want to chime in on this, but I actually wanted to go into like a lot of detail. So here we are. This is like going to be unedited and everything. I put a PowerPoint together. Like editing, I'm not good at it, so we're just going for it. All right. But yeah, this is like what makes a Yu-Gi-Oh deck like bad competitively in that context. So let's see, because basically, right, to have a deck be bad, we kind of have to find out what makes a deck good. You know, like you can't say, oh, this is bad without being like, okay, but why? And something is typically bad because it doesn't have the things that something good does have. So then it's like, what does something good have? And we gotta figure that out. Put together a little list. I think the best decks kind of have. This is what I think probably makes a deck good. There may be one or two other things that I just haven't included, but I think these are some of the really important points. So I'm going to go over them. I'm going to actually deconstruct them and go over some examples. So this is the ceiling. Like, what is your deck doing if you get everything you want, right? You draw the perfect hand. You don't get interrupted by anything. What is your deck doing? And realistically, the highest ceiling is your FTKing your opponent, right? Like, technically nothing is better than just FTKing your opponent. That is the highest ceiling. It doesn't always occur because of other reasons, but this is the highest ceiling is FTKing, and below that's probably, you know, setting up a board with like a bunch of negates or interruptions, blah blah blah. You know what I mean, right? You get what I'm saying. You just set up your best board that your deck ever does, and that's something a lot of decks do. Like someone's like Gen X deck with the new support. Like I've seen some crazy Gen X combos, like Ice Barrier combos. You do like insane stuff, you know. It is because you're never getting. It is, if you're not interrupted, you have the perfect hand. Like awesome. And like obviously, a deck has to have a high power level, have a high ceiling, for it to compete. Like if your ceiling is not very good, it's like, oh, okay, my opponent didn't draw any interruptions. I've got the perfect hand. And then it's like, set magic cylinder, let's go. Yeah, it's not. Your opponent's still gonna beat you. I hate to say it. All my magic cylinder enjoyers, I'm one of them. If your turn is set magic cylinder, set marshmallow, you might not be winning that one, chief. Okay, so then the next point is like consistency, right? Like you could have the highest ceiling in the world, but if you only draw it one every 200 games, then you're losing those other 199 games, aren't you? And that's not the best thing to be doing over the course of a 10, 11 round event like a YCS. 13 rounds nowadays, right? You know, you want to kind of see your combos a lot of the time, rather than once in a blue moon. This is one of the biggest things I think that makes a deck really good. You know, if your deck does good every single time you open a hand, you open your hand and you go, yeah, this does it every single time. Like, awesome. That's really good. That's what you want in a deck. But if you go like, if I drew this hand again, the same hand, if I drew the same hand that I drew 5 games ago, you know, this one perfect hand that I have to draw every single time for my deck to be good. Yeah, it's kind of not. It kind of like this kind of occurs as well to decks that really need like a specific card. You know, like if a deck 100% needs its field spell, it's like look at Agnista, right? Without the link 1, the deck had a ceiling. It definitely did stuff, but it didn't have, without like easy access to the field spell, it really kind of struggled to do much. But then as soon as Dark Infant was printed, and you had the mythical Link one that searches a field spell, suddenly the deck just jumped up, because now every single one of your Cyberse monsters became, okay, well now this gets the field spell. Like, it was crazy how much of a difference Dark Infant made for the consistency of the deck. And that's why Link ones that search a field spell are often so good for decks that do rely on the field spell, because typically that's your, like, the biggest consistency issue. And you're running like, 3 field spell, terraforming, maybe even set rotation, and if you don't see it, you don't see it, and you go womp. But if you do see it, you're going crazy. Like, that's a good example. Is Agnister. As a Cyberse player myself, I love Agnister. Your next thing is like your floor. Like, what are you doing most of the time? Like, yeah, you're not going to draw the perfect hand every game, right? But what do you do? If you don't draw the perfect hand, you draw like a normal hand, you know? Like Salaman, great example of this. You know, they see Gazelle often, back in like TOS format, right? You'd see 2 level 3s, you'd make Stalio, you can make Gazelle. Like all your hands, you were making Balinks, you're grabbing Sanctuary, you're making Sunlight Wolf, probably adding back Gazelle, setting a trap card like 99% of the time. And if you didn't see a way into Gazelle, you'd probably seen your trap cards anyway. So you've probably seen Rage, maybe Roar or Strike, maybe even set up a rank 4 depending on your hand, but like you didn't always set up a rank 4. But you still pretty much set up some interruption, you had protection, you had recovery, you had like Gazelle back in your hand, you had Spinny in the graveyard if you'd used it as material for Stalio. Like you did stuff every single time you opened your hand. Like 99% of the time. Obviously, you know, no deck is 100% consistent. Right, you're gonna see a hand of like 5 trap cards. Or like 3 Ash Blossom, Rage Roar, or something, you know? But most of the time, you're gonna see a playable hand. And then yeah, Versatility. This is like, kind of, it's like, you know, your deck, say you do your combo, and you're like, awesome. And then your opponent goes, alright, here's a way that your interruptions actually don't care about. Like, they don't actually interrupt. And it's like, oh, huh. Like, say you're a deck that like let's even look at like Kashtira, right? A Rise Heart is like a huge big macrocosmos, and it's a quick effect banish, right? But then your opponent goes, oh, well, actually, I don't care about your macro, smile. So then it's like, okay, well, what other interruptions do you have? What, like, and that's why a Rise Heart was good as well, right? Because it was also an interruption, it wasn't just a floodgate. And then you also had like Fenrir, you had Unicorn, you had other cool things, and things like that. Like Sprite was very versatile. You have you obviously have, you know, your Double Toad negates is very powerful because they're so versatile. You had Double Toad, but then you had like Double Cross, which is a steal that helps a lot of things. You could have Sprint as a bounce. Like lots of varied interruptions make a deck more versatile. Rank 4 decks. Look at rank 4 decks also great, right? Like, okay, you play game 1, you find out what deck your opponent's on, you go, okay, well the rank 4 I made game 1, Baguska, don't do anything against my opponent's Labyrinth deck. So I'm gonna make Tornado Dragon instead. Or I'm up against Unchained. Maybe I'll make Dweller. Like it's the rank 4 toolbox. It's a toolbox for a reason, right? Like you get to make cool stuff turn 1 now that you know what you're up against. And XYZs seem to be pretty versatile in general because going second, you know, you're not always going to go first. So how are you going to deal with going second? You can't build a deck to always go second. Well, you can actually. But you can't build a deck to always go first. So stuff like Zeus is an insane tool going second. XYZ decks and even non-XYZ decks that can play a way into Zeus are often going to play it because it's so good going second, wiping out your opponent's board. It's just really, really good, really versatile, and this is just what makes a deck like good if it has those types of tools. And then yeah, your grind game, your recovery. If your opponent like stops you, or if your opponent interrupts you, or if your opponent breaks your board, but maybe they don't set up the best board, but you're low on resources. Okay, like what are you doing next turn? What are you doing turn 3? If you're not OTKing them, what are you doing? How are you setting up your turn for the next turn? How are you continuing your game plan? How are you staying ahead of your opponent? You know, Sky Striker, obviously, engage, resolving engage as much as possible. You draw a card, you get your bonus card every single time you resolve engage if you have the 3 spells in the graveyard. And that's, you know, going +1 every time you resolve engage is really helping your recovery, and it's really helping your grind game. You're just gonna wanna get more cards than your opponent. You know, you're gonna get that card advantage. Sky Striker was very, very good at that. Kagari recycling engage, Kagari recycling engage, Hayate Regari, engage, multi-roll engage. I could go on. And then your resilience, like you get hand trapped. You know, oh, my engage got ashed. Oh, my sprite blue got ashed. My gigantic sprite got impermed. My Tailments Merly got DD crowed. Okay, then what? You know, do you keep going? Do you continue? My Fenrir got ashed. My Fenrir got impermed. Okay, so special Rise Heart, and then keep going. Like, it's kind of okay. So how do you play through things? If your one Ash Blossom stops your entire combo, and then you go, oh, turn end, maybe not the best, especially if hand traps are prevalent in that format. And Lunar Light was really good because they had access to just making Azathoth on their own turn. Like, forget about making it on your opponent's turn. Lunar Light just went, yeah, we're just gonna make it now. Now you can't hand trap me, you know? And that's like, oh, I guess they protected themselves from all the hand traps. It's pretty good. And not to mention, Kaleido Chick did that by sending Martin for cost. So you can't even get ashed on the Kaleido Chick. It's not like they had a choke point before the Azathoth, not really. So it was very strong into just stopping your opponent from interrupting you and just letting you go off, letting you draw getting you to your ceiling every time. Obviously some hand traps better than others for these types of things. John and Lockbird, very, very good. Artifact Lancier, Dimension Shifter, those ones are harder to play through, you know? But having a game plan for if you do get hit by them is always good. Like back when Kashtira was the best deck, and if you got Drolled, it'd be like, okay, well, what am I gonna do after I get Drolled? Because everyone's playing Droll for super heavy. So if I get Drolled game 1, what am I gonna do? You know, I just special Unicorn, added Theosis. My opponent Drolls me. Okay, I'm gonna rip a card from the extra deck. I'm gonna Theosis for a Fenrir. If I don't have an extender in hand, maybe Unicorn Fenrir is what I'm ending on. You know? Or if I do have an extender, maybe I'm making Shangira, maybe I'm special in Right Heart, maybe I'm banishing one because we're doing all of this under Droll. Like, how are you playing through these hand traps? How are you continuing your game plan and making sure you don't just fold to one interruption? And the last one's kind of just fairness. It's like, this one's a bit more difficult to kind of put into words. But I like to look at it as like, if a card goes +1, it's good. Most of the time, right? Like, Engage, insane. Like, you're going +1 every time. Tailments, Kick Kalos, realistically, like, insane. Like, you know, you're searching one on summon, you're getting to send one and summon one, which is going to trigger a second effect in Mill 5. So and then that's going to trigger a bunch of stuff. Like, that's, you could describe that as unfair. Unfair doesn't necessarily mean, you know, or not fair doesn't necessarily mean broken or ban-worthy. Often they are, because that's why they're, you know, not fair. Pot of Greed, Pre-Errata Future Fusion, Painful Choice, Spellbook of Judgment, all of those cards just were insane. You know, you just plussed so hard off them. You would probably definitely describe them as like unfair cards. And if your deck has cards like those, if your deck has cards that just continue plussing every time, it's going to probably be good. Most good decks, most decks that are meta have cards like this. You know, like most decks are going to plus as often as they can. It might not be off of like one combo. It might not be off of one card. They might have like a teeny tiny combo that like pluses, and that might make them good. Like one of my favorite pet decks, Ninja, right? Like Notebook of Mystery. This card I think is insane, and when I resolve it, I go +3. When I do my little Notebook of Mystery combo that ends with Notebook of Mystery back in my hand, so I can do it again, I've gone +3 from that. But that's just because ninjas have one cool loop that goes plus doesn't necessarily mean deck's going to be insane, because it might not have all the other factors. So let's take a case study, right? Let's look at Drytron 2020. So before Mu Beta Fafnir came out, but before Union Carrier got banned. So we were playing Dawn Knight alongside Union Carrier. The ceiling. What did they do if they drew a perfect hand? Yeah, you were losing the game if Drytron drew a perfect hand and you didn't draw an interruption. If they had Herald of Ultimateness or Herald of Perfection, 3 to 5 fairies in hand, possibly Eva, so they could get 2 more. Vanity's Rulers often on the field because they hadn't used their normal summon. Like they were winning, right? Like you're not breaking their board. You're not breaking their board without a board breaker. And even then, you know, you had to draw some very specific ones. The consistency of Drytron, very high. You know, if you drew names, you were pretty much getting there because Dawn Knight and Union Carrier together let you just go, okay, well, I'm just going to dump Gamma, and then Gamma, like, if I drew Ben 10, like, I'm just, you know, we're gaming, right? We're going. We're just going for it. And when Mubeta Fafnir came out afterwards, it became even more insane because Mubeta reads like one of the most broken cards. I don't know how it got printed, but yeah. The floor for Drytron was like, okay, so what's the floor? Okay, well, you draw a name, you draw Ben 10, or you draw a name, you draw rituals. It's like, okay, well, I'm searching, I'm getting fairies. Maybe I'm normal summoning vanities because that's the most I can do, but that's still decent, right? Like if a deck doesn't have an out to vanities instantly, you're probably winning next turn because you're not locked into vanities and you have all your Drytrons again. So your floor is fairly high often. So it's quite good, quite good. And as I said earlier in the video, for your versatility, negates one of the best things because they always, like, they're very versatile. I don't think negates are necessarily the healthiest things for a deck to set up 10 negate, like 5 negates or something, but they're very, very versatile, they're very good, because everything, like most things, activate. And being able to sit behind 5 negates and a Vanity's Ruler does kind of hit a lot of things. But then if you go second, like, you just go, okay, here's a Borrow Sword, here's a Borrow Sword, I'm breaking your board, here's Cyber Angel Natasha, I'm stealing everything. You know, oh, what's that? Oh, I can't break your board and kill you? Okay, just, you know, get Zeus, Lamau, like, we play the Lyrilisk, we hit directly, we make Zeus, and that doesn't even take many resources, so you can get to do stuff afterwards. So, it's very, quite a versatile deck. And then, you know, as if that wasn't enough, every single Drytron could just activate from the graveyard. Like, turn 3, I have all 4 names again active. I have 1 ritual monster in hand, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Alpha tribute that ritual monster, search another ritual monster. Oh, that ritual monster was Ben 10? Okay, grab another Ben 10. You're just going off again. Like, your opponent can break your entire board, but you have all 4 names back in your graveyard, and you are just popping off yet again. And resilience. So this is maybe the quote-unquote weakest point of Drytron, right? Like, if you get drolled, sometimes you just end your turn. If you don't draw a perfect hand, sometimes you just end your turn. But you also, you know, you don't lose to a lot of the other hand traps. You get ashed on your alpha, okay? Well, I have Zeta and I have, you know, Delta maybe. You know, I attributed Ben 10 for cost. I'm still gonna get my surge off of Ben 10. Oh, you ghost spelled my Gamma? Cool, I guess. Here's Delta. We didn't necessarily need it before. Like, oh, you ashed my Ben 10? Cool. We just activate it again. And even droll can sometimes just go, oh, you droll me? I have Orange Light. Lamau. Like, you just have Orange Light, and then you go, okay, your droll doesn't matter. Oh, what? I sent Eva off my Orange Light? I'm actually plussing? Off of you drolling me? Like, crazy. Yeah, this deck, very resilient to hand traps. It's just, yeah, it's crazy. And then, you know, fairness. What I said earlier, like, every single deck, every single Drytron name summons itself, and then gives you another card. Like, Alpha gives you a ritual, Zeta gives you a ritual spell, Gamma gives you another Drytron name, Delta just draws you a card, which can be non-engine. And non-engine is important in decks. And then Eva, like, you know, just plussing, and Ben 10 resolving a million times, and then go on and on and on. Just kind of crazy. Kind of crazy. So, what do we need? You know? Which ones are the best ones to have? And personally, I think the ceiling of your decks, probably the weakest of the points to have. Like, there are so many gimmicky FTK decks, you know, so many decks have that perfect ceiling where you just win the game turn 1, but they can't, you know, they can't do it through a hand trap, or they're not consistent, so they don't do much if they don't see the exact hand. And it's just like, oop, guess I lose, smile, you know, like, it's like if you see perfect hand, yeah, you win, but if you're only seeing that 1 in 10 games, you're not winning the event, are you? You're losing the event. You're going to table 500. And so power, probably the weakest aspect. Obviously, you still have to have a high power to be good, but you don't have to FTK your opponent. Consistency, I think, is one of the biggest things. It's like what kind of ties in as well to just because it's everything, right? You have to do, and the consistency ties into the floor of your deck. Like they kind of are linked together, but you have to be able to actually play the game every single time you draw a hand. I think the consistency of your deck is one of the most important things to keep in mind when you're thinking that, okay, is my deck viable? Can I take my deck and can I compete at a tournament level? One of the biggest things you should ask yourself is, how consistent is it? You know, if I do 20 test hands and 2 of them are playable, you know, maybe 2 of them are the perfect hand and 6 of them are mediocre, then the other 12 aren't playable. Probably not the best idea. But if 5 of them are the perfect hand, the other 15 are decent and decently playable, you might have a solid road deck on your hands. So I think consistency is one of the biggest factors. The next one, probably like versatility, because if you're able to just kind of adapt to whatever your opponent's playing, game 2, game 3, you're gonna have a really good time. Especially if you can like, you know, go second, because you're not winning every dice roll, right? You're not winning every dice roll. You're never gonna go first 100% of the time. So if you can go second game 1, you can go second game 3, if you can adapt to what your opponent's playing, you have good sideboard matchups. You know, you have good matchups against decks. You have a very solid sideboard plan. You can do well. You know, you just know what you're doing. You have that versatile deck. You can do well at an event. So I think consistency and versatility are the most important 2 things, in my opinion. The recovery and the grind game are important, but if your deck is consistent enough and versatile enough to adapt to everything and to always have a decent hand, you're not necessarily going to get to turn 4, turn 5 every single time. You know, it's going to be a rare occurrence to actually get there. So you don't necessarily need it all of the time. And resilience is like the same, I think. Obviously you have to be able to play through 1 Ash Blossom, right? Because most decks are going to have hand traps. And a lot of the time you're going to get hit by hand traps. But then it depends on the format, right? If your deck is you're in a board breaker format and your deck is weak to hand traps, maybe you play that deck because hand traps aren't being played, because board breakers are being played. You know, maybe your deck is strong against board breakers, weak to hand traps, so you can play it. But it's still important to have this grind game. It's important to have this recovery. It's important to have this resistance. But I don't think it's as important than the consistency of your deck and the versatility of the deck, in my opinion. If I had to rank them, you know, I'd go consistency, versatility, resilience, recovery. And consistency and floor are kind of like linked, you know, those 2 are together. Yeah, and then, you know, the final thing will be power at the bottom, which is still very important. It's still important. You still have to have good power, but yeah, you just kind of don't. You don't have to FTK your opponent. And so, like, what makes a deck bad then? When is a deck bad as opposed to good? You know, I mean, the obvious answer when it doesn't have those points. You know, when a deck isn't versatile, when a deck isn't consistent, when a deck doesn't have a high floor, when it has no recovery. Like, look, you know, look at like most FTK decks, right? The biggest ceiling, the highest ceiling, but they lose to like 50% of hand traps, and they lose to not going first, and they lose to, you know, any deck with any interruption, and like they're not going to be great. Yeah, you'll win some games when you go first, but if you can't do anything else, your deck beats itself by not drawing good 90% of the time. Probably not a good deck, you know? But, like, at the end of the day, it doesn't mean you can't enjoy those decks. And I don't want to, like, tell anyone you can't play a bad deck. You can't play decks that don't have these, you know? Like, go for it. Please play those decks. Have fun with this game. Because that is the most important thing, I think. Just have fun. Enjoy yourself. You can take them to an event. You can take them to your YCS, you know? Just don't necessarily expect to win. Don't expect a day 2 if you're playing a deck that loses to itself 80% of the time. But if you want to go just to have fun, if you want to go to just experience playing the game, go for it. Like, genuinely. I take cubics to regionals because I'm like, yes, it's the anti-meta, cool, really, real. But then it's like, you know, I don't actually expect to top with them. But it's just funny. And that is like one of the most important things. Just have fun with this game, you know. And I guess my final conclusion on what makes a deck bad is that when a deck is bad in the context of a competitive environment, when it just fails to achieve much, when faced with the conditions of the meta decks and what they play, what hand traps, everything that they play, that's what makes a deck quote unquote bad. But yeah. Anyway, thanks for listening to my ramble and my rant. I've no clue how this is going to be received. Follow my Twitter. I'm active on there with Cyburst Gaming. Subscribe, I guess. Everything's in the description. I don't know how to end this. So, gaming.